Welcome to the public hearing. Today is April 27th, 2022. The time is 7:03. The following notice of a public hearing was published in the Journal-Inquirer Wednesday, April 20th, 2022, and again for the location change on Friday, April 22nd, 2022. Notice is hereby given that the location of the public hearing on April 27th, 2022 at 7 p.m. for the Town of Enfield's proposed annual operating and capital budget for the fiscal year July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023 has been moved from the Enfield Annex to the Enfield Town Hall, Town Council Chambers, 820 Enfield Street, Enfield, Connecticut. All electors and taxpayers will be provided an opportunity to express their opinions regarding the proposed budget. At this time, Town Clerk Sheila Bailey, roll call for the Town Council, please.
Deputy Mayor Sakala.
Here.
Mayor Casati.
Here.
Councilor Despard.
Here.
Councilor Finger.
Here.
Councilor Hopkins.
Here.
Councilor Ludwig is absent. Councilor Mangini.
Here.
Councilor Pisner.
Here.
Councilor Santinella.
Here.
Councilor Ungary.
Here.
That's 9 members are present and 1 is absent.
I would also like to acknowledge the Chairwoman, Tina LeBlanc, and Vice Chair Scott Ryder to the dais from the Board of Ed. And we also welcome our Superintendent, Chris Drezik, tonight, and also in attendance, Director of Finance, John Wilcox. Okay. Would everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Prior to hearing from the citizens and the people who are in attendance who are going to speak tonight, we're going to have 2 brief presentations. First from the school superintendent, Mr. Drezik, and then from the town manager, Ms. Ellen Zapu Sasu, and then we will turn to the audience at that point. I would like to bring up at this point Mr. Superintendent Drezik. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of board leadership, people watching at home. This is the Board of Education's proposed budget that the council's already heard. The community's heard. It's actually been posted on YouTube, on our websites. But for the sake of this evening, I won't make it as long as the last 2 times I've given this presentation. I will try to get through this a little bit quicker for everyone's interest so you can get to the purpose of this evening to hear from residents. And Alex, help me out here. Okay, I can't see that far.
From beginning.
Yeah, okay. Hopefully this works again. So our philosophy going into the budget, particularly this year with a lot of coming out of 2 years of COVID, there was a particular philosophy that started with us in the district, and obviously the board had adopted. And it was pretty simple. One was most important was getting our kids through this pandemic. We're all sitting in a room together without a mask on for the first time in 2.5 years, but that doesn't mean it's over. What our kids have been through, the same that we've all been through, the stress and the anguish that our kids have living with, it's going to be with us for quite some time. We recognize that. So that was our most important priority as we started to put this fiscal picture together. The other was we wanted to stretch the funding out as far as we possibly could. We've been down this road before. Some of you were members of elected officials. I saw one in the audience tonight that used to be sitting on this dais. And we can remember what's happened in years past when a large influx of federal money was made available to municipalities and districts. And then when that money dried up, the end result was the elimination of numerous staff members. In particular, the last time there was a big influx of federal funding was what was referred to as the ARA funding back in 2008, 2009. And the funding saved about 20 positions the Board of Education at the time was about to eliminate. And we were able to save those 20 positions when the funding came in. But when the funding cliff happened, That resulted in us losing 60 staff members on the Board of Ed side. So we want to make sure that we do this responsibly and make sure we can stretch the funding out to benefit our kids and the town as a whole as best we can. And really the last point is sustainability. You know, the efforts that we put in place using this funding, we want to make sure that we can sustain that year after year because we know the needs of our kids are growing year by year. I'll just briefly touch upon the different types of federal funding that we received throughout and are currently still receiving. It's similar to what you're receiving on the council. The first was the Coronavirus Relief Fund. Again, that was $995,000. That was the only of the grants that we received from the federal government that you were able to actually reimburse yourself for costs throughout the pandemic. And all this information is publicly available, so this is where I'll try to be quicker. The next are the ESSER funds. There's two different levels of that. You've probably heard this acronym at some point. This is the first round of ESSER funds, and as you can see, we are also the grantee. So as a Board of Ed, you're the grantee for us when it comes to ECS money. In this particular case, we're the grantee for our private schools in town or our parochial schools in town. So that's where that's a little bit unique. That was the first round of ESSER. Like anything else, a good acronym never goes to waste with the federal government. So we have ESSER 2. You can see that's a larger increase. The one thing I will bring to the attention of the public is there is some money that's been expended for this, but as you can see in this particular slide, we're not required to expend all of these fundings until the due dates that are on there. So in this particular case, that helps our priority of sustaining this a little bit longer because we don't have to spend all the money right out of the gate right away. And then the largest one, and these are some of the initiatives that we put in place using the ESSER funds. And one of them I would like to highlight is that I know it's a topic of conversation that a lot of us have is the mental health and well-being of our kids. This year, by using this federal resources, we were able to put a social worker in every one of our schools. We've hired over 40 behavioral techs for our students who have social and emotional needs in our buildings that can become disruptive. These are things we wouldn't ordinarily have had the funds to do without the assistance from the federal government. And then the big one is obviously the American Rescue Plan, which as council members you're aware of, but we also got a large portion to that. As you can see, we have to put in the application and we have to designate it. The good thing about this process, and it's John Wilcox approved, is we are allowed to make changes and I don't want to say reductions. We can make adjustments as our needs fit. So this is one area of collaboration between the town and the board, represented by myself and the town manager, where we have the ability to do essentially legacy projects in this town that we ordinarily, I said this to you the last time I was sitting in this chamber with you guys. Does anybody think we're getting $7 million from the feds again? So would it make sense to just say, yeah, let's go out and spend it tomorrow, and then 2 years from now when it's gone, we've got nothing to show for it? There's another way of saying that, but we're on television, so I won't. So this is where the partnership between the Board of Ed and the Town Council really comes to fruition. So the town manager and I have had numerous meetings and plenty more scheduled to talk about projects that we can ultimately bring to you for community input to make sure we've got one shot. This check's only coming once. And we want to make sure that everybody understands the importance of whatever projects we're able to do with this funding, we're able to do, and they can also sustain it townwide as well. I'm sure you guys are all sick of grant talk, so I'm going to jump into, okay, how much did we ask for? Reminding you what our philosophy is, that we're trying to get our kids through this pandemic. This pandemic is still going on, and we want to stretch our funds as far as we can because I don't want to come back to you as a superintendent and tell the town council we need more money, or we ran out, we spent everything we got, we need to have some more. And I know the chair agrees with that because I won't be in this chair if she has to come back to you and ask you guys for more money, as well as sustainability. Our current budget, as you're aware, is $72,109,522. That's our current adopted budget for this fiscal year. Everybody knows what this means, fixed costs, and I'll make the analogy to things go up. Anybody bought a gallon of milk lately? Anybody fill up your car lately? Just because we're a public school system doesn't mean we're exempt from prices increasing, from supply chain issues, from inflation, all those fun things that everybody's dealing with. You know, we're not exempt from that just because we're a public school system. So our costs do go up. But our cost, right, that we have estimated for next year, that fixed cost, just basically what we have now and repeating what we're currently doing in this school year, is about 1.77%, or an increase over what we currently have. Normally, we get a lot of questions about, well, that shouldn't be so high, but when we know the magic number of inflation is at 8%, I think that's pretty reasonable. I don't know if Jack will ever agree with me. I saw him for the first time tonight, but I'm sure he wouldn't argue with me on that one. There's an additional 0.53% increase built into the budget request that the board passed on to the council, and that's very simple. It's an additional team at a brand-new building that you guys are all going to be invited to cut a ribbon on in September, and I'm sticking with that. You're all aware that the community invested a large sum of money into rebuilding our middle school, which I am not exaggerating, will be the nicest middle school I've ever seen, and probably in the state. And that's a testament to the work between the board and the council, but also with the support of the community. Those of you can also probably remember, if you've been here, that when we first had to undertake the construction project, the JFK is built on teams. So if you're in 6th grade on the red team, and there's different wings throughout the building, we're actually operating down a wing, down a team of teachers. And a team is consistent of an English, math, science, and social studies, but there's also a special education teacher for each team, a specialist. That could be anything from, art, music, PE, as well as the bilingual teacher I'll get into a second. That team, we've been operating down one for ever since the construction project began. We've been able to sustain that because, to be quite honest, under construction, we don't have room in the current existence of the building to add the team back now, even if we wanted to and had the funding to do. There's just physically no space to add another team. But one of the commitments that the board made and that the council at the time made was they would reinstate that team at JFK when the building was built new. Your new building was built for the additional team. So if we don't fund that additional team of staff members, you will have some empty spaces in that building because the team structure is already built in that building. And the last thing, even though it's not part of the team, we have to add what's called a bilingual teacher. And what that means is if we reach a certain threshold of our students that speak English as a second language, the state of Connecticut requires us to offer a bilingual program. And right now, the bilingual program is slated to be at our secondary levels between JFK and Enfield High School. If we get nothing and we don't get any additional funding, that position is still going to be included in the budget. It just means we're going to have to cut something else in order to fund it. That is a requirement. That is the state mandate. Our students where English is a second language for them, that percentage has reached that threshold where the state of Connecticut requires us to offer a bilingual program. We're confident that we can do that by adding just one bilingual teacher. But as of right now, we have a department of TESOL teachers, but in order to do that, we would have to add an additional staff member. Our team worked very hard to make sure that we can get through with just adding that one staff member in order to meet that requirement, and we're confident that we can do so. So we also talk about the minimum budget requirement. Some of you new council members are aware what it is now because you just gave us a big check a couple weeks ago. What I've done, we've done in years past, and it's all personal preference among who's sitting in those chairs, is whether the council appropriates that during the budget or after the budget. For purposes of this year, we included that in our budget request. And what that means is right now, the way it stands, about 0.59% of our actual appropriation. So as long as we're funded at that, you don't have to cut us a check next spring to make up the difference from whatever that MBR would be. Again, it's not a preference one way or the other. That's not a negative connotation whatsoever. It's just the way that it's been operating. But it's also a possibility where you wouldn't have to do that in the event the council was able to fund beyond that threshold. But that is included in that 1.7% that we had requested. This is a little bit irrelevant, but I'll get to it in a second. But the budget request that the board sent to you as a council was a 2.31% increase. That was about 1.72% more than that minimum budget requirement. And it's really about 1.19% more if you don't add those JFK additions, which is the team I talked about earlier. At the time that we presented this, there were a lot of unknowns like there are every year. We talk about this process being a little bit backwards, that we go in January, your budget's not set, the state budget's not set, and I have a lot of things that I just simply don't know come January. I don't know how many people are going to retire in January because teachers aren't required to tell me until February. Our insurance numbers, I'll kick it to this guy. We get a preliminary number early in the process. You guys actually get a more clear number before you have to set your budget, but then we have to put in, we can never budget lower than that. There's always a not to exceed number. So we do budget that a little bit more conservatively with the idea that we can bring that down as the number does come down. And it's ironic, I mentioned this in January, change in personnel. That's not just retirements. To be quite honest, that's just people leaving us. This has been a difficult transition for a lot of our staff members over these past 2 years. I'm just going to be blunt about it. We have a lot of people changing careers. We have a lot of people who are looking to do something else. And we're doing everything we can to retain people, but the reality is a lot of people are leaving us and just either trying to do something else if they're not quite retirement eligible, some people are relocating. Everything that would happen in your personal lives with people we're not exempt from that either. Those are things I didn't know come January. I still don't know everything, but I know enough that through retirements and resignations and some of our insurance figures coming down a bit, and that's also contingent about the amount of people who are coming and going, because if someone's leaving and they're on a family plan, without boring you about insurance, we have the opportunity to budget a little bit differently. Through all of that, one of the marching orders that I get from the board, and luckily our new town manager was in agreement because I told her she didn't really have a choice, is that once I submit this, we have to keep working because we make a commitment and the board gives me a direction. Keep working with the town manager, and if we're going to ask for a certain dollar amount with the promise that if we don't need it all, we'll reduce our request. And I actually notified the board last evening that through conversations between the town manager and I, as well as internal conversations about who's actually leaving and what we think we can replace people with, we've identified about $500,000 in a reduction that can be made to the board's request that the board had submitted to the council. In the event, and I want to be very clear for those of you who are watching, that doesn't mean we're saying cut the budget by $500,000 and we got to cut something else. The board can absorb a $500,000 reduction in their request without changing anything I talked about. No effect on staff, no effect on programs. These are the areas of unknown that we didn't know in January that we have a more clear picture today of. There will not be an impact to the way we operate with that reduction. There's always hope that that can come down lower, but right now that's the point where we're comfortable saying to the town, if we were cut by X amount, it's actually, I don't even like use the word cut. It's almost like a voluntary reduction. So because when you say cut, that gets people not talking and liking each other. It's not a cut. The board made a promise to the council. If we can reduce our request, we will. They're able to do that by about $500,000 at this point. So what that actually means, you still get the same thing. You get no reduction in programs or staff. You do get your new team at JFK, the bilingual teachers in there, but let me remind you, that's coming whether we get 0 or we get 10%. And everything that we currently have, we would be able to retain and keep and build upon. I'm not going to read this, it's hard to read, but this is a historical perspective of what I've requested, or not even me, my predecessor, because this chart's getting long. This is what the board has actually adopted and requested of the council, and then the pink is what the council's actually appropriated. It's all out there if you want to see it. But what this really means in the new request, because some council members may be hearing this for the first time, because we've been working up until, well, even today. Our original request of 2.31% can be reduced to 1.61%. And the dollar amount on that would go from $73,775 to $73,270. There's your $500,000 reduction. So that allows us to continue everything we have and allows me to turn this over to the town manager.
Thank you, Mr. Drezek. Town Manager, Ellen Zaposasu.
So good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be presenting for public hearing purposes the proposed budget for the town of Enfield. The just as part of the opening, I'll address the first comment to the town council. Some of these slides are going to be familiar to you, but I felt it was important, since this was the first time that we were presenting formally to the public, that they have some of the introductory slides and be privy to some of the conversations that we've had that have gotten us to this point. As everybody knows, this was a revaluation year, and our taxable grand list increased by almost $550 million. The revaluation year also resulted in the increase in substantial values. On a residential side, it was almost 27%, and on the commercial side, it was 8%. It also showed that the motor vehicle portion of the grand list grew with an increase of over $93 million, and there was an increase of 523 additional cars listed on the grand list. So where does that bring us for today? What it brings us for today is that we are presenting a budget that maintains services and addresses a variety of community needs. For tonight's discussion, the proposed mill rate is 30.49, which is a reduction of almost 4 mills, showing the delta of the increased valuation. There is work to be done, though. As we go through this presentation, there is a lot that goes into the budget. There's so many different components, and I do want the public to have an understanding of all of those machinations as we go forward. And also, just for informational purposes, this is the list that is currently comprising our top 10 taxpayers on the commercial side. It ranges from Connecticut Light and Power, which owns a significant amount of asset here in Enfield, down to the one of the plazas. But look at that amount. There's a lot of money that gets paid on our commercial side. That is increasing 8% overall. Here's what our grand list looked like for the fiscal year, broken down by real estate, by personal property, the motor vehicle numbers, and in general, the grand list growth, and the additional tax revenue from that growth at the current mill rate. So going back to the puzzle pieces, there are a variety of pieces that put together the budget. The first that we're showing is the proposed revenues. We receive money from taxes, from licenses and permits. We charge for services. We have investment earnings, and then we have some other miscellaneous revenue. And then we have the grants. So all of these funding sources are what comprise our revenue side of the house. We also have another puzzle piece, which is the state revenue, and this is what we are currently projected to receive. There are a few small declines, so to speak, and I do pull your attention to the last line, which shows a 4% decrease in the ECS grant. This is directly related to the potential of Enfield entering the Alliance District. So we have erred on the conservative side and removed that money that will be designated in another way to go to the Board of Ed just for a safety purpose. There is a chance that come next Wednesday, when the legislature adjourns, that might change, but we don't know, so we're just having that conversation as we put all these pieces together. Combined, this is what the proposed budget looks like. And you can see, because I did have a conversation with the superintendent, that I have highlighted the Board of Ed numbers, because as you saw from his presentation, those are going to be reduced. And all of this information that we're hearing from all of these various pieces of the puzzle will be brought forward next week during the deliberations and be factored into the conversations for that piece. I also think it's important for everyone to see the mill rate. The mill rate is how we establish the tax rate. And for several years, it's been held flat through the pandemic at 34.23. Tonight, for the purposes of discussion, again, for the viewing public, this is most likely going to change, but a fiscal year 23 proposed mill rate for discussion purposes is 30.49. That maintains services as we currently have them in the town of Enfield. So the formula is it's 30.49 for every $1,000 of taxable value. Taxable value is the 70% of the market value of the property as established by the assessor's office, and 1 mil in the town of Enfield is equivalent to $3,584,000. So this number is important in terms of, do we want to increase our spending? Do we want to decrease our spending? Every mil is valued at $3.5+ million. So for those of you watching from home saying, well, I want the mill rate lowered by 2 mils. I want to get it below 30. I want it to be around 28 or 29. Well, that would mean that we would be looking to find over $7 million to cut from this budget in order to make that happen. So that's a formidable task. So this slide is an introductory slide. Not only are we looking at mill rates for the provision of services, but in Enfield, the fire districts also impose their own tax. They are in the process of having their annual meetings, and they will be also looking at the valuation pieces and how that has affected how they do the fire districts. But for comparison purposes, we talked about this last week. This is just a quick slide showing how residential values median-wise have increased across the 5 fire districts, which is a great way for comparison purposes per district, per neighborhood. So you can see it starts with the 2020 versus 2021 data, pre-revaluation to revaluation, in the Enfield Fire District, in Thompsonville, in Hazardville, North Thompsonville, and Shaker Pines across. There's been a significant jump in that residential value base. I'm going to turn this part of the presentation over to our Assistant Town Manager and Human Resources Director, Steve Belinda, to talk about some of our greatest assets.
Thank you, Ellen. Our employees are our greatest asset, and they're also our greatest liability. As of 4 o'clock today, we have about 679 employees. 418 full-time, 97 part-time, and about 164 seasonal. But they are a big liability, a financial liability. We have to pay wages, full-time, part-time, overtime, Medicare insurance, Social Security, pension contributions for the police and the general employees. That comes to about 73% of the budget. This is common along many municipalities, that your biggest liability is your financial liability is your employees. But not only financial liability, we also have legal liability. Because we're government employees, they have constitutional rights. I can't deprive someone of their job without giving them due process rights under the Constitution. And on top of that, we have the whole alphabet soup of federal and statutory law. ADA, COBRA, EEOC, FLSA, FMLA, HIPAA, MIRA. There's so many, I could go on. And on top of those rights, they also have contractual rights, because over 85% of our employees are in unions, so there's a collective bargaining agreement. We have to honor that contract. We negotiate dutifully, and both parties have to oblige by that contract, and if not, then we litigate. So as we have to navigate through this legal minefield of all these rights that our employees have, you would think that in light of all these benefits, we'd have no problem attracting people and keeping them here. But that's not the case. There's a lot of poaching going on with other municipalities, state and federal agencies, state governments, and just to allude to what Superintendent Dresnick was saying earlier, people are switching careers. We just had a police officer that we sent to the academy there 6 months. We invested in this person. They're in field training. She decided, you know what, I don't think being a police officer is for me anymore. I'm going back to banking. I don't begrudge this person, because I don't want someone being a police officer if they don't want to be, but this is the risk we have today as we invest in our employees, and for whatever reason, they just don't last. They decide career change, unforeseeable. There was nothing we could have done to stop that. So what are we doing to try to attract and keep our employees? We are evaluating a lot of the non-union employees, what their wages are. If we're not far off and we think we can do something to keep them, we're trying to do that. We've been doing some wage increases, because they're getting, like I said earlier, they're getting poached by other municipalities. And I hate to lose an employee to the neighboring town because they're willing to give a little bit more. It takes a lot of effort and work to market, to campaign, to try to get someone to come work here versus keeping that employee here in the first place. Which leads to my one of my next bullets is, you've heard of exit interviews. Well, we're doing something called stay interviews. An exit interview is a little too late. They already made the decision. They got the offer. They signed it. They're gone. I wish we could have, should have, did something to keep it. Instead, I was at this seminar in New Orleans, and what the trend now is state interviews. What is it that you like about the job? What is it you don't like? What can we do to keep you here? It's a lot less expensive to keep an employee than to recruit a brand new employee. When a vacancy does occur, we're looking at hybrid positions. Can we tap into this person? Do they have a skill set that we can utilize in another environment? Like we just did a big reorg in the social services department. We took a lot of jobs, we dissolved some of the jobs, and we created hybrid jobs. I'm a result of a hybrid position by overseeing HR and then assuming the assistant town manager job. This is something that's trending along other municipalities in the state of Connecticut as well. We're also looking at hiring consultants to help the surge in workloads. With the new ARPA funding coming, we just hired a temporary consultant to help with that surge for the construction that we anticipate coming through the ARPA funds. Our current purchasing agent is already up to her neck in a lot of the current projects and the CIP plan. To add the ARPA would have just overwhelmed her. So we had the foresight to go and seek a consultant that will come on a limited basis to help offset that and reduce employee stress. Other things we've been doing, and I already talked to my staff about, is contacting the schools, the Asnunta College, where we can tap into talent. There's a lot of kids out there that don't know what they want to be when they grow up. They don't even know what they don't know. And we have to try to find them. We have to try to ingrain in them ideas. There's careers in government that they didn't even think about, and good careers too. They can raise families with. Not just the police officer or the fireman. There's plenty of thriving jobs here. And I will leave it with a statistic that I just learned last week that floored me. In the state of Connecticut, there's over 70,000 jobs that are vacant in every walk of life. So when you see advertising go on at Electric Boat with signing bonuses to be a welder, when you see Pratt & Whitney, you see Sikorsky, you see state, federal, local agencies advertising, trying to get employees to come work for them, that tells you something. But what even is more startling is that there's more than 70,000 people out of work in the state of Connecticut. So we have a disconnect. Those where the jobs are and those that aren't working. We got to try to get to these people to get them to kind of open their eyes and say, you know what, there's plenty of career opportunities here in the town of Enfield. And I will yield back to Ellen.
Going along those lines, the vast majority of the town budget has contractual obligations and mandatory increases, and we've spelled out some of them here that we thought would be of most interest. The good news is that the health insurance increase, while a modest 3%, due to the reduction in some of the decreasing claims and personnel changes, is going to be a zero to the budget. When we have contractual union increases per contract for those wages, that's going to be reflected at about $420,000. We have our bond principal and interest. That's part of our financial structure. That's coming in at about $206,000. And then I thought this was important to include because there's been so much publicity about it. But we and every other town in the state are now facing increased unfunded mandates through the police accountability bill, where we as a municipality have to have certain things in place, including dash cams, improved body cameras, drug detection equipment and training, and a bunch of other manpower issues, including psychological training for officers, wellness checks, etc. So that impact of House Bill 6004 from 2 years ago is $272,000 and change. So right there, we have almost $1 million coming in at $900,215 of contractual and mandatory increases. To shed a little bit of light on what some of the salaries look like, we have broken it down. I know that that's kind of hard to see, but again, I think important for everybody to know from a contractual obligation, salaries, benefits, purchased professional and technical, purchased property services, supplies and materials, including utilities, property and equipment, our debt service for bonds, and our debt service for leases, and we have some capital transfers and transfers to other funds, which is almost $3 million. We've also had some new positions, and so in the interest of transparency, we just want to show the public quickly that in the last budget, there was some discussion about increasing the number of sworn police officers. That was done. The town council, what did I skip? John Wilcox to my rescue here. Oh, thank you. So the new positions are 5 police officers that were funded that will now show up as regular salaries for July 1st. The 4 patrol officers are pegged at about $292,000, and then one of them is going to be a detective position for $89,000. We've also converted a position for the electronics, everything that goes into the technology and surveillance and everything that they use for police work. That is now going to be a part-time, non-sworn officer for $30,000. In the Public Works Department, in order to handle the demand and the breadth of what that department covers, from building and grounds to custodial to water pollution control and everything else, we are adding a position, which will be a deputy director administration position. And also, due to the expansion of JFK, there's going to be the addition of a custodian that will be needed to handle the additional square footage that is being added to the inventory. We're also seeing that the combined Department of Assessment and Tax Revenue has some stresses on it in terms of the workload. So we are proposing an assistant assessor position within that office. So that brings the total new positions to $627,000 proposed for this budget. As Steve Belinda referenced earlier, there are some non-union position market adjustments that were made that we felt were very appropriate in order to retain talent. Those included positions that have already been funded this year, and moving forward, we are suggesting that there be some adjustments for building department as well as the assessment and tax collector department. We've given some additional responsibility and compensated appropriately our staff people within the Economic and Community Development Division, which is now a standalone department, which previously was under planning and land use. And then additionally, as Steve mentioned, we've combined his position because there was capacity to do so. We are anticipating some settlement of union contracts, which will cost us $762,000, and then there's some various other miscellaneous changes. Moving on, fund balance is also a concept that's really important. There is a healthy fund balance, which is really, I think most people will refer to it as the rainy day fund, but we take money from that in order to use it for the budget. The minimum fund balance requirement here per policy in the town of Enfield is that you must also have 9% in reserve. That dollar amount is $13,787,920. The remaining fund balance stays healthy. We're at 24.7, and we are above what that fund balance requirement is. So for the viewing public, it's important to know that there is a very healthy financial strategy as well as policies in order to maintain financial health. Moving on, knowing that we have this delta between the increased value that people have and even decreasing that mill rate, we are still going to be looking at a number where there could be the potential that residents and commercial in the town of Enfield would be paying more than what they've paid in the past due to these increasing values. So in conversations with Mayor Corsati, he tasked me with finding some additional ways in order to provide relief. So tonight I am showing to the town council for the first time that there are 2 programs that you could consider, and this is targeting seniors. Seniors are important because they're obviously mostly living on fixed incomes. They're in retirement mode. They're living off savings. They're trying to age in place, and we want them to be able to stay and live independently in their homes in Enfield, close to their communities, their churches, their services, as long as possible. So I've identified 2 programs for the town council to think about in terms of their deliberations over the next couple of weeks as you move toward adoption. The first is the Senior and Disabled Tax Relief Program. This may sound familiar to people because we already have this in place, but Connecticut General Statutes 12-129N allows Enfield to actually do a parallel program where you can package a town-funded one with the state one. Now, the interesting part, as with most of the state work, they have not funded the state program for a number of years. We've picked up that half in order to maintain that, but we can actually do a second piece with the Senior and and disabled tax relief if we chose to do so and increase that benefit. The second one is relatively new. It's called the Senior Volunteer Tax Relief, and usually it's a pilot program in a community because it is new. But this is where participating seniors may earn an annual tax credit per household. So if there was a couple, it would still only be one tax credit by performing a determined number of volunteer hours in the community at a qualified nonprofit. It can be anywhere from $300 to $500 right off their tax bill if they were to certify that those hours had been done. So those are two ideas that we can think about and would provide a little additional stability to people instead of hitting them with that bump. In terms of the senior disabled program, I'll just say that under that section, here in Enfield, in 2020, over 500 seniors used the program that's currently in place. And the reimbursement that we did for the state piece, for which they did not fund the town, was almost $350,000. So there are people using the program. And if we wanted to adopt a parallel program for senior and disabled tax relief, we would have to fund it. But there's also pieces that we'd have to do, including forming a task force that would then report back in order to show the town council what that fiscal impact would be of said tax relief. They would then recommend the form, they would recommend the extent, they could vary the amount, and that would be something that if you chose to explore it, could be put in place for fiscal year July 1st, 2023. So there are some things that would have to be done before we do that. And to be clear, it would not be in effect for July 1st, 2022. Okay. So capital and long-term improvement projects are also critical to the economic as well as the physical health of a community. It is often the case that in some communities, deferred maintenance is a way to save money when you're comprising your budget. It's very good to see that in this town, people believe in the infrastructure and that investment. And so there is a marked increase in what we're doing this year, and a lot of that is because of the availability of ARPA funds. So we're going to take everyone quickly through what some of those thoughts are in terms of using the ARPA funds and then the overall capital and long-term improvement project. I don't know why this is here. This is out of order, but we are planning on using fund balance for $4.3 million. That's the breakdown. We're using some from bond premium, some from our mill rate stabilization reserve. So for the total amount that we will be pulling into the budget from fund balance will be 4.3 roughly toward our capital projects. Part of the big piece here is our water line and sewer infrastructure. So we're proposing almost $4 million for designing and replacing our pump stations. There's always in every community a lot of conversation when there's a sewer tax. This is going to actually use some of these ARPA dollars to stretch that investment and really remove it from the taxation piece. So residents will not have to really carry the burden of what it would normally cost for this because we're going to take some of that out of the ARPA funds. And really the ARPA funds, in our estimation, is the best way to aid the taxpayer is to allocate those funds to those long-term strategies where you're going to see the biggest investment or bang for your buck, so to speak. Water line and sewer infrastructure is critical to the community. So if we can put that type of money and front load those types of pump station improvements and upgrades, that's going to be really a great thing for the community and will keep us ahead of the game in terms of our capital non-recurring costs and what we invest. So there will be savings to the sewer users if these ARPA funds are utilized because they will not be coming out of any other sinking funds or our future CIP needs. So this is probably an unpopular slide, so I might make John Wilcox do it because I'm relatively new. But we are proposing a very small increase with the sewer rates, and you can see here the base rate and the usage charges. It turns out to be about $3 increase per quarter. So it would go to $3.70. And again, open for conversation. I will again disclaim that these are proposed budget conversations at this point. So here's kind of an opening slide, our capital improvement program and the proposed funding sources for next year. From taxpayers, the general infusion for our capital improvement, 7.4. We are receiving state grants of almost 1.4 million. We are bringing in almost 3 million in ARPA funds, and then we have some other funds set aside to the tune of about 973,000. Notable here is that this is about a $12 million category, so to speak. This is significantly more than what the town has put towards CIP in the past. Based on the availability of funds, it's time to get some projects done. So again, deferred maintenance costs money. Jerry-rigging things costs money. Being able to go in and have a preventative maintenance plan and be able to keep things clean, keep things fresh, and keep things in good working order saves the taxpayer money over time. So for the next couple of slides, we just have a sampling so that the taxpayer residents will have an idea of where some of these CIP projects go. I have combined some of the categories because it is a pretty lengthy list, but I'm just going to quickly scan through that. We have a lot of infrastructure, the guts of buildings, mechanical issues, things that are important for high usage, like the annex, which gets a lot of traffic, the gym floor. We have roofs that we have to do. And again, when you don't do your roof, we all know what happens. Draw your attention to about halfway down this page, the bulky waste compactor. Probably the least sexy item on this list, but that one is set up to actually save taxpayers a significant amount of money because we can actually compact trash and pull the containers out of the transfer station less than we're constantly doing. Containers that are not compacted down have a lot of air and space in them, so you're constantly pulling them out more frequently because you're not compacting it down. Every time we pull a container out and we bring in our vendor to do that, that costs everybody money. So the least amount of containers being pulled out actually results in taxpayer savings. Obviously, we're continuing the roads program, which has been very successful here. We are replacing parking lots, which are in very dire condition at many of our schools. We have roofs, we have generators, transfer switches. The school sprinkler system at the Enfield Street School is no longer holding pressure. It needs to be replaced. These are all life safety issues as well. So the list was comprised based on priority need, and it is a significant one, and it's one that we really can't wait on a variety of these items. So it was designed both to address these emerging needs, address needs that have been here for a while, but also from a life safety perspective, make sure that we're putting our dollars where we can reduce our liability and risk. Another quick pointing out of the freshwater pond dredging. Not a luxury. That is being mandated by the Army Corps of Engineers, and it must be done every 5 years. So the next list has a couple of other interesting items on it as well. You will see that more schools, we have windows, we have an excavator, MIDI excavator, which is a critical piece of equipment that is very versatile, which would help us do a lot of work in a lot more efficient fashion. We're replacing a culvert on Orlando Drive. Interesting, that one, if that culvert were to collapse, it would cut off an entire neighborhood. So again, very nuts and bolts type of public works projects, which are part of our charge. That's what we're here for, is in order to provide those public services. The elevator at Pearl Street, that's giving us a problem. Regular replacement of police cruisers, I believe that number is 14, right, John? We've cut it to... Yeah, that's 14 cruisers. And again, you know, when you think about a police cruiser is not like our own vehicles where you drive it to work, drive it home, maybe go to the grocery store. That one cruiser is used 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by 3 different shifts. So the burnout piece of going through police cruisers is significant. We need to get it on a vehicle replacement schedule where it makes sense and that we can do it in an orderly fashion so that we're making it as efficient as possible. Again, more garages. I'll draw everyone's attention. Relocation of the Civil War Monument. The Strand in Lamagna is proposed for either redevelopment or for demolition. And we do not want to leave that soldier monument there. And there are some plans that have been presented from both the police department, economic development, and recently reviewed by the Veterans Council about relocating that monument further south across from Corona's on that little pocket park that is by the bridge. So that's an expense that we're looking at as well. Some additional trucks, the South River Street Bridge, critical project there, and there is a contribution from the town for that. And then some other issues, uninterrupted power source at Town Hall. We currently don't have that, so there's some risks there as well. And I believe there's a few other projects on the last page. Oh, no, that was it. So from that, we're going to move into the ARPA funds. This is what we've done to date with the money that's been given to the town of Enfield. The total amount that was brought in last spring was almost $13 million. To date, these are the projects that have been paid for and or which funds are appropriated. The Enfield Express purchase, Health District for testing site when we had the climb in infection rates in January. We did premium pay for our employees because we valued all of their contributions through the pandemic. And we are putting some working plans in place for the bike path. Also, there is plans for a band shell and some fitness stations and an enhanced parking area to the rear of this building for the new Higgins Park. So to date, $2.5 million roughly has been used from the ARPA funds given to Enfield. Now, this year, these are the projects that we're talking about that will use some of those funds. Starts with water pollution control that we've talked about, the temporary purchasing assistance that Steve mentioned to get us over the hump of getting all of these projects that need to be bid and put out to bid and managed, frankly. We need some additional assistance or else everything's going to get stuck in that cycle. And really, it's competitive because when you think about it, all other communities have ARPA funds as well. So everyone's chomping to get those contractors in place, those paving contracts in place, who can do roofs, and there's only so many contractors. We are poising ourselves to be competitive and being able to be shovel ready and get those projects done with that one-time temporary purchasing assistance. It is not a full-time position, does not have benefits, and when we no longer need it, the service goes away. And those are some of the strategic issues that are positioned in this budget. Again, a parking lot, several parking lots, and the tennis courts, which are having issues at the high school. And then we have a mandatory fuel tank replacement, which is a multi-phase program. Those have to be out of the ground in the next couple of years. So that is, again, a funding item that is not a luxury, but mandatory. Anybody who's ever used a bathroom here in Town Hall, you feel like you're back in third grade at a much-loved parochial school where those things do not ever get renovated. I love the color combination of, orange and green on the second floor. But we do have some plumbing issues, and there's some stability issues in terms of water supply here. So that's something that is tentatively looked at as well. And then the addition of a couple of more trucks in order to add to the fleet for Public Works. So the planned usage at this point that is being proposed to the Town Council, use of ARPA funds within the capital improvement plan is $6.2 million. Okay. So the next steps are we have available, we have a little less than that now, but we need to determine parameters and a budget for projects that the Town Council would like to explore. And they've charged us with talking about assistance to nonprofits, as well as businesses in town who have been affected through the pandemic and are poised to do things that would likely be beneficial and have an infusion of cash. So when you look at ARPA funds, it designates 5 different areas in which the funds can be used. Assistance to businesses and nonprofits, and we know that they play a critical role here, are the 2 pieces that are left. And again, I'll reiterate that ARPA funds do not run across a budget cycle. So we can continue to have thoughtful conversations about how best to deploy that money into our community over the course of the next couple of months. In every budget, you try to have a strategic plan. And this year, we brought back for the departments that they needed to state, and you will see in the final budget book, their goals and accomplishments, how they've evaluated their own department, what they did well, and moving ahead, what they're looking for in terms of their strategic plan for the next year. And we're going to be tracking that. Every department here has a role to play in improving the future of Enfield. We're also on the verge of adopting a new plan of conservation and development, which needs to be taken into consideration as well. So we've identified some areas that we think Enfield would do well to look forward to in terms of moving ahead. These will be conversation items over the course of the next several months. But in my short time here, I have noticed that Enfield does a lot very well. But there are some areas that can use some shoring up, and it is a very competitive environment. As you can see from economic development, businesses relocating, businesses expanding. We need to have a concerted effort to promote Enfield's assets and attractions. And so we've been moving toward having some of those conversations. It's also really important to know that there are two audiences for that. The first is the internal audience, the people who live and work here. And then there's the external audience, the people that you want to bring into Enfield, either for permanent relocation of their businesses and their employees, or retail establishments, or anybody just coming here for recreational opportunities. Positioning Enfield in such a way that it's a destination in the region or for specific issues, that's something that I think we can work on and improve upon. Maximizing financial opportunities through the aggressive pursuit of grants is something that every community is doing now because of the uncertainty of some of the other funding sources. We do very well here, thanks in part to Nelson Tereso, who used to work at the state and is now our economic development director. But we also have very talented grant writers in other departments that pursue funds within their departments as well to bring additional dollars into Enfield. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are huge initiatives across the country, and now they're being linked to some grant funding. So it's important to have a policy, a plan, and conversations within the community about what that means for Enfield. And then our economic development strategy. We are very decentralized with how we do it in terms of retaining, recruiting, and assistance to businesses looking to expand. And this is the small mom and pop, this is the large warehouse, this is Route 190, this is anyone who's entrepreneurial, looking to come into or expand or has a business idea. Right now it's a little decentralized, and I'd like to refocus it and have it flow in one direction. And all of us have a role to play. Everyone is an ambassador for Enfield and can talk to the points about why it would be good for businesses to come here. And then obviously, you've heard the superintendent talk about it, but robust mental health and wellness programs are critical not just for our youth, but for everybody. And so there's an opportunity to provide those through social services, youth services, recreation, in conjunction with our Board of Education, as well as so many of our nonprofit partners, in order to make sure that we're offering what the community needs in terms of quality of life. Which brings us into the physical aspects of quality of life in Enfield neighborhoods. Code enforcement and property maintenance enforcement is key, and we've reorganized our Troubled Properties Committee in order to go after some of our eyesores a little bit more aggressively, and at the same time, reduce the community's risk and liability, which some of these do present. We have a lot of tools at our disposal, and we're going to start coordinating those efforts across department lines, including our fire marshals throughout the districts and our social services for hoarding purposes. The health district has their own set of tools that they can bring to the table, but we really want to make sure that people who invest and have their nest egg, their home as their main asset, are not living in a neighborhood that has troubled properties or blight that is decreasing their value as well as their enjoyment of their own properties. So there's a good pathway for that as well, and we're starting on that. And for those of you who will be tuning into the council meeting on Monday, we've already had our first success story with a long-term troubled property in Thompsonville. So moving on. These are kind of the open issues as we move forward with deliberations, which will start next week for the town council. We are going to have additional changes. One of them is a very good one, a $500,000 shift thanks to our friends at the Board of Education. We are still monitoring along with them the Alliance Fund status, whether that comes to fruition or not, but it's important to know that it's out there. Tax relief for senior citizens is a conversation that we should be having. And then the future piece of American Rescue Plan dollars, because this is not just for this year, but they can be rolled into next year and frankly the year after that as well. The reporting has to be done by December of 2026. So moving forward, the budget deliberation is next Wednesday. Our tentative adoption date is May 16th. We did hear two pieces of news out of Hartford today. The first being that the legislature and the governor have come to some type of tentative budget agreement, which is good for us for planning purposes. But also, there appears to be movement afoot with mill rate cap on motor vehicle, which will be problematic here because we have our own mill rate to deal with, but then we have fire district mill rates. And if there's a cap and it exceeds that, then there's going to have to be some conversations about how that would possibly be implemented. So as I said in the beginning, a lot of moving pieces, a lot of open issues, but I think that there's been great progress made over the course of the last month or so as we kind of narrow the channel here and look to see where we're going to go for budget adoption. So I believe, Mayor, that is the end of my presentation.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you to Superintendent Drezek and to our Town Manager, Ellen Zapu-Sasu. Thank you. Very informative. Now we see where we are at this point. I know that we're going to be getting into our deliberations next week. Really looking forward to that. But at this point in time, we would like to invite members of the public to come forward and speak. Please note that there is a 5-minute time limit, but I ask each person not to take up that much time. If there's not that many speakers, if you want to continue on, that's fine, so that everyone has an opportunity to speak. I also remind people that they may speak only on the budget and not random topics. And please refrain from commenting from any personalities. I do have a sign-up list, and the first person that I have on the list is Jack Sheridan. If you'd like to come up, Jack, and just state once again, your name and your address for the record. And welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be out and about. My name's Jack Sheridan, 7 Buchanan Road. Thank you all very much for your presentation. The details are great. There was a lot of questions you answered in going through. I had written down a few of them. But I'll start out with low-hanging fruit. We talked about fixed income seniors, and I did just the first 4 months of this year, and my costs went up $1,800 in those 4 months. I can't raise my taxes. I have no revenue to increase, so I have to cut. And what I'm asking you to do here tonight is relook very closely at the budget and cut things that there's really good things on here that I it's hard to find fault with, because like you said, if you want to invest in the town and its future, but can we delay it? Can we, at a time when we're all being hit with the increased costs, food and gas and everything? I mean, I made a list. The water bill went up $44. Electric went up $528. This is just my house. The natural gas went up $336. Healthcare went up $265. And I can just go on the list, but you've seen it in your own budgets, the same thing. However, I can only cut so much, I see things like, well, let's start. I start up. What really ranks me is buying the bank building for tax collection. We've been mailing our taxes. All it takes is a stamp on an envelope. Gone. We didn't need that building. Was it excess? I don't know. From the outside looking in, it looks like it. It looks like we didn't have to spend that kind of money on that building, and we took it off the revenue rolls. So that bothers me. The substitute salaries in the budget, in the school budget, $535,000 for substitutes. That's been the same thereabouts. It has been as high as $800,000. But $535,000 for substitutes? That should be looked at. Relocation of the monument, $100,000. Leave it where it is for a while. It's been there all these years. You know, this is a year when we need, and I shouldn't say that because I don't know all the, intricacies of what you're talking about. The annex scoreboard replace, $10,500. Leave it. Here's another one, a sinking fund. I've been around this town long enough and been associated with the politics of this town long enough to know there was never a sinking fund until a couple years back. And the sinking fund, in my opinion, is illegal because what it did was it found a way around the spending of the town charter. And that's what it does, because you're able to put money which you weren't able to do before. So to me, that should be eliminated. Transfer station improvements, $610,000. Here's another, pump station upgrades, $500,000. You talked about that as part of this money, but that originally, and I have the paperwork for this, what was it? Curran and something Curran. There were two names that did the assessment on that, and they talked about what the tax or cost would be for the sewer per month, and they missed it, so they raised it. And the pumps were originally in the water pollution control rebuild. That was part of it. It's in there. I've got it at home. I've got that list at home where that was included originally. Now, all of a sudden, they overspent on what they did down there. They didn't anticipate building and putting on the things that they did. We were told that it was plenty big enough for the capacity of everything that we needed. And in fact, even the prison. So I don't know why that's on there. Tennis court, $418,000. School rating, 3.7. The Realtor.com, we look up any house in Enfield. A couple of months ago, it was 4.7. Now it's 3.7 out of 10. Why? We're spending more and more money every year on the schools, and yet we're rated that low? If that was a business, any kind of business, I don't care if you're making clothespins or airplanes, if you're at 3.7, you're out of business. So somebody has to take a close look at that. I'm looking at you.
Looking right back at
We were told with the reevaluation increase that the new revenue from businesses and everything would cover it. And if not covered, they could adjust the mill rate. And this is just something, when we redid the energy things, boilers and lights and windows and all those things in the schools, there was a matrix that they said that they would provide us with to show the actual effectiveness and savings of what we did. I haven't seen anybody talk about that since that was put into effect. Now, maybe you guys know about it, but there was supposed to be a savings that would pay for itself. The whole idea was, there was so much savings that, yeah, go ahead and spend the money because it'll reimburse itself. So that's all I had. I appreciate you going through the budget, and I appreciate what's happening, but I really think we need to curb extra spending right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. Next, Donna Suzak.
Donna Suzak, 35 South Road. I like it over here. I've come to speak in favor of the budget. I looked at the overall budget, 149, 151 million. It's a big town. We do a lot of services. Now let's look at the problem. The problem is the reevaluation. The problem is, if we've all been watching for the past 5 years, the commercial and the retail has kind of taken a hit. COVID came, and I think it accelerated the process. We're all working at home. Our homes become more valuable. I mean, we're all happy that asset has improved. The problem is that asset has improved, and there's a shift in our commercial and our residential, and we're going to have to start carrying the ball. The residential is going to be carrying more of the ball of the reevaluation. I caution you not to take it out of CIP. You're not going to stay flat this year. The only way to stay flat is to go to fund balance. There's nothing wrong with going to fund balance. I mean, it is so healthy. And as you all know, I own homes in other states. I'll share with you what happened in my home in Colorado. Paid my taxes, paid regional taxes, paid everything. The end of the year, they had a little bit extra money. They sent it back to me. They sent it back to me. I was stunned. So it's sort of like maybe that's what fund balance is here. And maybe this is the year that you're going to have to raise the taxes. I mean, just because it's so disproportionate, the change in the value of commercial versus retail and residential. I guess I've said enough on that. Board of Ed, good work. Come a long way, an absolute long way in doing that. The other thing that I'd like to, I guess, we have a bigger infrastructure than our surrounding towns, and we need to continue to look to be regional. Marie and I sat with the budget. I'll be honest. She hooked me in, and I sat down with her. And you are increasing your dispatch. And I don't know if you've reached out to surrounding communities that there might be dispatch that could be shared with other communities, because other communities are a little bit more have a rural feel than the town of Enfield does. And you know, Steve, you hit it on the head. You know, this is a service industry. We're run by our staff, but we do have to improve the infrastructure. I've been talking about this since the early 90s, and I'm really, I spent a lot of years on the council, and that was what was important to me, so I'm coming here again. Do not keep pushing it. You push it, it used to be 4% it goes up. It's probably more like 10. It's not going to go away. It's just like when we go to vote and they say there's something needs to be repaired. Because you vote no doesn't mean it's going to be fixed. It has to be fixed. So let me see if I have any other notes here that I've scribbled down on here. The sewer. Eventually we're going to get to where we don't increase it. It's probably, at this point, comparable to all the surrounding communities, so we can't complain too much. But keep up the good work. Keep up the infrastructure. It's so important how the town appears to new people coming in and to other people and businesses visiting. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Donna. Greatly appreciate it. Okay, next, Gary Young.
Good evening. Gary Young, 320 Abbey Road. I had to write everything out, and now I have new questions after your presentation this evening. I would like to take some time to address my concerns relating to the proposed budget for fiscal year 22-23. After watching the initial video and listening to it being mentioned multiple times, the budget is preliminary. I will state that based on your initial presentation with the adjusted mill rate and the new assessment, our property taxes for our home would increase over $760 in 1 year. That is a 14% increase over the course of 1 year. During our residency of 16 years at this current residence, I have never had an increase that drastic in 1 year. In fact, we have seen an average of $175, including the fire district tax with 6 different changes. That does not include the vehicle property taxes for the 2 vehicles that we use to and from commute work. I would like to be very proactive here in your early stages of working the budget, as I'm sure many other residents will follow suit and say that that type of an increase would be unacceptable, and knowing the fire district may not be far behind, I am not at all in support of this drastic increase in 1 year, especially over the course of the last 16 years. As mentioned, the increase has been nothing close to this. My wife and I have a fiscal responsibility to manage our income and our bills accordingly, and we expect the town to do the same and not grab more from our pockets. In addition, it is not the residents' responsibility to all of a sudden open our checkbooks and help you fund past purchases, complete projects, and/or fiscal irresponsibilities from the past. To keep in line with the average increase of our property taxes, the mill rate needs to be closer to around 27 or 28%, which equates to about a $100 increase without the fire district included here. Again, as mentioned, we have not heard from the fire districts, and ironically, this is roughly the same exact drop mentioned in your presentation. So I'm suspecting you've heard that number. In addition to myself, I will speak to the concern of the elderly residents as well, which was addressed in your presentation tonight. Specifically, my father, who also resides in this town, and I'm sure he will also be facing the burden of trying to find extra income to pay an increased property tax for both his home and vehicle, with more importantly noted on fixed retired income, and has done more than his share of providing to the town's expenses over the course of 60-plus years. You have asked residents for suggestions on how to utilize ARPA funds, and I will be speaking to that topic in a moment, but as a suggestion quickly, I have submitted and will state here as well, the town taxpayers who are actually paying vehicle property taxes in the town where we reside should see some form of revenue back in our pockets directly for either future tax relief to the vehicle as we are current or some form of rebate. Again, this is for vehicles that we are being taxed on in our residence, town of Enfield. If we are current with the tax rebate, it goes towards the bill. If past debt owed, the money is applied towards past debt, which goes back directly to the town, where the revenue is expected from the budget. Before I get into some concerns relating to the actual proposed budget, I would like to first speak to the notification or communication methods to the residents for this proposed budget, especially noting tonight that you're looking at a May 4th and a May 16th date, I believe it was. I will not speak for other residents specifically. However, I suspect that many be as frustrated as myself as we work all day, have households to run, and are not able to wait around looking for new information to be posted and not sure where it will be posted or how it's going to become available. I was not even aware of the video from April 6th until I was told by another resident it was available. I have since gone to the town website and turned on alerts for town council meetings and just about any other occurrence in the town and everything relating to them to try to stay more informed in a timely manner. However, you should not be relying on that technology alone to keep the residents informed. Originally, when I wrote this letter after reviewing the video, I had one main concern, and that was relating to notification to the public as quickly as possible that this information was either coming or now available. Now that the information is starting to come out, I'd like to present the timeline of information being made available and how it appears to be anything close to transparent or made readily available, in my opinion at least. Based on the information being provided to the public and what I could find, I asked the town manager specifically, if you're taking the time to sell the fact of being transparent, then why has your social media account not been proactive or consistent to the messaging with updates or changes? There has been a post about the townwide cleanup, a post about weekly agendas, an EV station that was added recently. I can tell you from my perspective right now, taxpayer, main concern, assessment later is when the assessment letter that went out and how I'm going to be impacted financially and if I can survive in this town. I want to see where my money is going in town and what you plan on spending it on. Trying to find this information has been challenging at best from a date standpoint. I believe the timeline perspective from the town video for the original proposed budget was posted April 6th. This was not posted at all on the social media page that I could find. Had 267 views 3 days later when I found it. Increased by over 120 plus views in 24 hours or less after I posted it on the town forum. The proposed budget was then posted to the town site, I believe around Monday the 18th, and was not posted on her page at all that I could find. In addition, there's no way of knowing that it was posted to the page unless you go there and look for it. The town to the public meeting for the 27th, today, was posted, I believe, on the 21st to the town page, and I think also on your Facebook page, roughly the same date, which is not even a week's notice and being held at the town hall here for the public to join. We've seen quite some time along with an initial proposed rate that almost certainly increases everyone's property tax bill. You would expect a very large attendance. I suspect many did not know. As important as this topic is to the entire town, I would think it would be posted to the front page of the town website with either links to the resources currently available as mentioned above, or resources themselves on the front landing page. How am I doing on time?
How about another minute?
Your practice of having residents search for content and either inform them one way or another is consistent with local fire departments' recently way of notifying residents of changes or votes, neither which are acceptable or consistent at best. There are 4 people on the town manager payroll of $450,000. That's from budget page 11. 9 people on the IT payroll budget of page 135. And you're looking to add another position of a salary expense of $83,000 for a total of $899,000. Clearly, with that staffing and that team, we can do better at that expense and get the information to the public in a uniform and consistent manner. Notifying residents, relying on the JI alone certainly is not the path. The town recently spent money sending out a letter telling the residents in District 1 that they could start voting at JFK come July 1st, yet no mailer was created to let residents know this meeting was taking place. I'll come back for part 2. Thank you.
Okay, next, Michael Perina.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Michael Perina, 100 South Road. I know what it takes to put one of these together. I hate it myself. Thank you for doing it. I'm not even going to try and go line by line in this. It is outstanding. Do I like the numbers? No. Are they real? Yes. They're necessary. If they weren't necessary, they wouldn't be in here. The only problem I do have, Section 10-222 requires the Board of Ed to have their maintenance numbers in their proposals. As they are acting as a arm of the state for budgetary purposes, they are required to have their maintenance numbers inside of their proposal. The town cannot absorb that. You can co-report it. That is fine. The town has no skin in this game. The Board of Ed is required by 10-222 to supplement their numbers with maintenance. Very bottom of 10-222 from the current statutes. The total cost of the maintenance of the schools, the amount received from the state and other sources, the town, for the maintenance of those schools, and the net cost to the municipality of the maintenance of the schools. It's buried in here. I can't tease it out. I'm a data analyst. I cannot see how the janitorial services per square foot in this town are actually measured. I'm not arguing we need another half a janitor. That is not up for debate, by all means. The town has done their fiduciary responsibility to provide a good budget to the people of the town. The Board of Ed has not met their statutory requirements to this board and to this town to provide a full and complete report. Unfortunately, that means it has to be rejected. Turn back, you have to reopen public hearing. 6 years I went back. I could probably go back more than that just by the Board of Ed's budgets. 6 years of documentation of co-reported budgets, and nothing has been actually complying to statute. It's insane. If I did that, I'd be in jail. I don't even know how to describe that. It floors me every time. 73% of the town's budget is employees. How much of that is directed to solely fund and support the school system? Again, zero argument. Necessary funding, willing to pay out of pocket, still pay, still live in town. It's coming out of my pocket, I don't care. But I want it broken out. This is an itemized bill that gets reported every year. This is, I love this thing. This, for me, is Candyland. I get to see where every dollar that I put into this town goes. It's wonderful, but it's incomplete. The mill rate. Mill rate goes down. Okay, yep, everybody's happy. Zero worries. Valuations went up, that's great. If I put up that slide tonight that just showed mill rate and dollar, I would not have a job. I would need to see a velocity per year. I would need to see the change in that dollar amount per mill rate, or dollar per mill, year over year over year over year, to see the factual increase or decrease. Town government, state government, federal government funds things that nobody would willingly pay out of your pocket. We're selfish beings. That's just the way it is. This is necessary. Again, we require that extra half gender, 100% on board. No questions asked. I just need it accounted for. The Axon Police Accountability, that was front-loaded 2 years ago. Confirmed last year. We knew that it was going to be impacting again this year. It's not a surprise, shouldn't be spec'd out. I'd love to see how it gets broken down, but it should have already been pre-accounted for in a budget, not just written off by some other incoming funding. Federal funding is never a guarantee. Why was the budget not preset? The story here is not that we had a great budget in place, it's that we counted on the federal funding. We can't do that. That federal funding is a reduction, it's an improvement to the budget, but it's still left pocket, right pocket. It's still taxation. Whether we gave it to the feds for them to give it back to us, or God help me, they actually just stole it from my kid's pocket, my grandkid's pocket. We all know the reality. You're new. Sewer use fee, not sewer tax. If we call it a sewer tax, it's back in the mill rate discussion. If it's a sewer use fee, it's a separate entity. I don't like that it's a separate entity. I liked when it was a sewer tax, because then I just paid one bill. I don't have to pay them 4 times a year. Guess what I'm doing? I'm paying a sewer tax, sewer use fee 4 times a year. So please, let's try and keep the nomenclature a little bit separate. And then here's a good one. How much of the town property is currently sitting inside of a federal hub zone? One of the largest selling points to a town for small business administration, for federal funding, is a hub zone. Having a hub zone that has almost no commercial or industrial space in it is staggering. The entire commercial and industrial district is on the other side of the highway. There's no more room over here that isn't residential, that hasn't been bought by the town, or is just one-off, two-off little shops. A couple hundred square feet, a couple thousand square feet at most. Small business, yes. But it's not going to attract a lot of business. I'm going to ask if you can please work with the legislatures to attempt to either increase the size, at least change the size, or potentially even move some of that hub zone property. It unfortunately has to be done at the federal level. But it will increase the marketability of this town. I don't know why it went down to the Thompsonville historically. I have an inkling of why. But it's one of the few things that we can actually market this town with, having a hub zone district that is zoned commercial, zoned industrial, zoned light industrial, zoned light commercial. I don't care if you end up having multi-use, where you have commercial on the first floor and you have multifamily up top. Modifying your zones will allow better use of a federal designation that is enticing to small business, that is enticing to federal contractors. Because guess what? They have requirements for 8A, for small business, for hub zone. You have a huge benefit sitting literally right under your feet, because town hall is inside of that hub zone. I really do thank you for your time, and I appreciate everyone's hard work, effort, long hours that I know that goes into this book, but it is incomplete. Please, before it goes out back to the public for vote, please make sure it is complete, even if that means the Board of Ed and the town have to co-report the same number, because there is nothing in here for Board of Ed for trash service, for water service, for electrical service. None of it is listed in any of their budgets for at least 6 years. And I can't see what that costs. It's all baked into the town budget. So I know that somebody at the Board of Ed has told the town what that is, or else you wouldn't have been able to forecast it. It just needs to be added to the report. That's the beauty of this. No additional work, just add it to the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Liz Warner?
Hi, I'm Liz Warner, 74 West Shore Drive. I was also really surprised not more people are here. So maybe this gentleman has a point. I want to thank everyone for all the time and effort they put into this. I can imagine what it's been taken to compile all that. I do have to say that I just quickly did a quick calculation with the previous mill rate, the current mill rate, and the proposed mill rate. And with just the town side alone, my taxes will go up almost $1,000 per year. So, and then there's fire. It's a whole nother subject, but I need to say that a lot of businesses, a lot of taxpayers are still struggling right now. And with the prices going crazy, we really need to, I'd like to see a zero tax increase again this year. However that has to happen. I know that you've been working hard with different departments, and I watched several of the presentations on YouTube. I see that there were departments that actually came in lower than they had in previous years, or just about even. I really appreciate that. I have a suggestion. This has happened on my job with the unions. I know that we've had negotiations and we have obligations for certain increases, but there is a possibility of asking them to hold off on those increases until such a time when Enfield can get back on its feet. Now, they have no obligation to accept that or not, but we've done it in the past because we wanted to show the taxpayer that we're supporting them. We've done it so that on my job, we did it to show the town that we're working to work with them. And if you decide to go that way, I hope you keep that in mind when you go into negotiations for those unions that weren't willing to work with you. I can't afford any more taxes. I feel like a lot of us are getting pushed out of town. And I love this town, I really do. There's so many great things about this town. Just quickly looking through that huge packet, I see some cruisers that need replacement. Could we look into going back with actual cruisers rather than $60,000 SUVs? It's going to cost a lot less in the long run for gas because they'll be more fuel efficient, excuse me, for maintenance, for tires, and so on and so forth. The other thing I want to mention, which is not in this budget, but I know should be, and has a resident actually told me this has been discussed for like 50 years. I knew about it for a couple of decades myself, that we have five wonderful fire departments in town here, but they're all separate. Some are paid, some are not. We're mainly relying on volunteers. And because there's 5 separate departments, there's a lot of overlap of jobs. There's so many apparatus in town here. We've got more apparatus than most big cities have. If I know that there are counselors and our town manager is working on this, please get this done. I think there's a little reluctance because people don't understand that we could have a fully paid, unified fire department for less money that we're paying now because of all the excess. And that is going to help everybody. It's going to help the firefighters because they'll have more flexibility. They'll have more ability to move up the ranks, move around town. We could have a department that actually represents the population because we definitely need some more diversity there. This really needs to happen. I've heard about fighting on the fire ground. It's time. It's really time. I think once that people understand that it's going to cost us less in the long run, I imagine it's going to take a while to get everything together, but that's going to save us tons of money, and I know there's people working on that. Thank you. So I just had one other idea, if I have time. Mayor?
As long as you talk about the budget.
Yes. I was watching the Department of Public Works presentation, and they were saying that we pay per ton, I guess, for waste. And he was saying how a lot of the glass just has to get thrown away because it's not clean enough to recycle. I would like to see some more public education going out. And in the meantime, maybe we could spend that money instead for somehow providing cleaning of those glass materials so they don't go into, because glass is heavy. So if that goes into our garbage, it's just increasing our fees. Instead of paying that, can we clean it? And then it's not getting sent to a dump, a waste dump somewhere, which is probably going to be a lot closer in the near future because there aren't a whole lot of recycling places out there. But in the meantime, if people understand what's needed of them and how that's going to affect the budget, I think you'll have a lot more compliance with the recycling. Thank you so much for letting us speak, and thank you again for all your work.
Okay, thank you. And that concludes the first round. Is there anybody else out in the audience that didn't sign up that would like to come in front of The council? Okay, second time? Is there anybody that would like to approach for a second time?
Thank you. Gary Young, 320 Abbey.
Just a reminder, 5 minutes.
Yep,
Okay,
gotcha. It'll be quicker than that.
thank you.
In addition to the communication gap, as I was noting earlier, as an area for improvement, I would like to recommend that departments be required to use a standard template, as many businesses do, for presenting their specific budgets. When I try to review the information on the town website, it was very difficult, number one, to find, but then to review the content shared. So far, by the departments that I could find, Police, 331, DPW, 329, Department of Libraries, I initially had given them the win on 330 for their presentation. However, the EPS presentation won tonight. So very easy to read. Thank you. Now I'd like to switch gears and speak to the budget directly. For anyone to defend the budget as it sits today and say, well, would you like us to cut police, or maybe education? How about public works? My answer is that is a flat no, and that is a narrow-minded approach to the budget overall. As noted tonight, many folks, I agree. There's been a lot of work and a lot of time and effort put into it. So I do not want that to go unrecognized, so I'm making that comment now. Most importantly, it should be noted that the proposed budget is showing additions to payroll in many different areas and additional positions being added, for example, and not anything being taken away. In fact, I saw an addition of 9 town employees on the presentation tonight with a value of $600,000+. After a quick review a moment ago, it looks like we have close to a $1 million add in payroll. So nothing is being pulled. So when we talk about reviewing the budget and hearing that we must address past expenditures, isn't adding to the payroll an example of spending money where we may not have it? Relating to the concern of an increased tax bill, here are some additional costs that we as homeowners have seen. Noted a few times tonight. First, we have seen the sewer fees take on a new meaning, since it has now become a separate bill, and in your proposal, another increase from the current quarterly fee of $39 to proposed $42. Of course, in the proposal is noted a slight increase of $3. I can tell you at one point our sewer fees were part of the property taxes. Note my tenure at the home, so any increase at all at this category, you might find some opposition from myself. I spoke earlier of our motor vehicle values also having increased, and all would say, well, you should be happy about that, like the value of your home. I, for one, can tell you that I'm not happy for the increase in either the vehicle specifically or for the upkeep, and there's no way I'd be going out and purchasing a new vehicle, especially if the mill rates increase. Now about household trash removal that we saw as an added bill just recently for many residents in the town. Also a cost that at first glance was part of the taxes already paid, but now has been an addition to many homes. The problem here, though, is I'm seeing a little bit of a theme as I'm generating. It is one more cost added to running the home and our property. As a resident, I'm seeing which is way above and beyond what originally was part of our property taxes. Our CMP bills is another world, and currently Connecticut sits in second place with an average of $160, which does not include the delivery fees on top of that. This information is provided by SaveOnEnergy.com. We basically have 2 ISP providers in town. That bill also continues to rise for the same services or less services, and I can tell you that the bulk of residents are paying top dollar for subpar networks. Someone earlier mentioned work from home. I myself do work from home. My wife works from home. The infrastructure at our residence is built back in the 70s. We have yet to see anything come better for our network speeds, but yet we're paying more and more each year as the bill goes up. Our cost to quality is frustrating at best, and we have less than optimal speeds. I've noted multiple areas of concern relating to our household income expenses increasing on a yearly basis and how we continue to see rising costs, and I haven't even mentioned cost of fuel and or groceries. For us to see our taxes go up because we saw our property values go up right now is not a very positive feeling or approach, and enlightening. I would like the town council from all districts to keep the folks you represent at the top of mind during all budget reviews and ask those tough questions as we ask ourselves as homeowners every day. When it comes to expenses, is this a need to have or a nice to have? I mentioned earlier about the ARPA funds utilization and just simply asking for residents to see a continual report similar to what was presented tonight, readily available and a little easier to find as projects are proposed, purpose of the project, and maybe a status of decisions rather than just the line item with a number. Our ability to review the pieces of utilization certainly would help through multiple meeting minutes. Right now, as I had to go through 4 different meeting minutes to find everything. There's also been many suggestions based on a review of the initial survey. So creating a category for ARPA fund usage in addition to the budget on the front page would also be a good consideration to make it easy again for residents. I did locate the high-level ARPA expenditure report, which was carried into the presentation tonight from the meeting dated 4/18. I'm now asking that you continue to proceed forward as it becomes much easier for residents to know updates have occurred and when additional public meetings will be held. There is still time for budget review, not much as I saw the dates noted tonight, May 4th deliberation and adoption on the 16th. Couple last items here. For the tax building purchase specifically, I may be wrong, but I thought the initial agreement was that the purchase price would be less the amount of rents paid. The purchase price represented tonight, I believe, is the original purchase price and does not reflect the monies paid in as a rent. And then the fund balance, the only thing I want to ask there is how much are we able to retain as the year completes before the state potentially comes in and asks for some of those monies? I want to thank you very much for your time and consideration, and obviously the work that's been done. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to come in front of us? Only once, twice. Public hearing is declared over. Thank you, everyone, for all of your comments. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you.